Watching the offense and the defense last season wasn't fun for Eagles fans, but now they have new coordinators in tow, hopefully to right the ship and get this team back to the Super Bowl. But will that come to fruition? Let's go ahead and discuss. And what's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and welcome back to the Deep Dive series where we take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And today, I got you. Fly, Eagles, fly. That's right, I got the Eagles. But before we get to their future, we got to talk about last season. The Eagles began the season on a 5-game winning streak, which included a nail-biter versus the Commanders, which came down to Jake Elliott and a 54-yard game-winning field goal in overtime. The suspense, it's killing me. But the offense didn't quite look like the juggernaut from 2022, and they were constantly just making mistakes. That caught up to them in Week 6 versus the Jets, where they kept New York in the game until they finally took the lead with a minute 45 left. Jalen Hurts threw a bad pass on 4th down to clinch the victory for the Jets, but this wasn't just on Hurts. There was fumbles, there was drops, there was missed field goals. It just wasn't a good performance. The Eagles would go on another 5-game winning streak, but the offensive miscues would remain, and now the secondary was regularly getting torched. And this was after trading for Kevin Byard. But the secondary wasn't just bad, they were also hurt. And now that's not to discredit the Eagles because they beat some legitimate playoff teams like the Dolphins, Cowboys, Chiefs, and Bills. However, this type of play wouldn't be sustainable in the playoffs, and that's what I call foreshadowing. The Eagles ended the season as bad as you could as a playoff team. They got blown out by the 49ers and the Cowboys. The offense was so bad that Matt Patricia took over the play calling, and the pass rush just disappeared. And in the season finale against the Giants, a game that they needed to win to clinch the division, they had to pull the starters because they were getting banged up. They would end up finishing the season 1-5 and would have to go to Tampa Bay to take on the Bucs in the wild card round. A.J. Brown would not play because of a right knee injury he picked up in the season finale, and the Eagles would get demolished. Baker Mayfield lit up the secondary for over 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. The Bucs averaged 4 yards per carry, and mind you, this was one of the worst run-blocking offensive lines in football. The Eagles were a shell of the 2022 NFC champions, and this led to Brian Johnson and Sean Desai being fired after the season. Play calling may have been uninspiring, but the talent on offense was good enough to keep this team efficient, as Philadelphia was 9th in rushing EPA, 8th in passing EPA, and 7th in points scored. However, the defense was awful. The rush defense was 28th, the pass defense was 26th, and they were 30th in points allowed. The Eagles knew that they needed to make changes, and oh boy, they made quite a few this offseason. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first-time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. The Eagles had a couple of legends retire in center Jason Kelce and defensive tackle Fletcher Cox. Those guys, in my opinion, no doubt Hall of Famers, but they also let running back DeAndre Swift get paid elsewhere, and we'll talk about his replacement when we get to the additions. But they also had a few solid backups leave via free agency, whether that was Suopeta, you had Jack Stoll, Jack Driscoll, and they also, you saw some vets leave via free agency on the defensive side in Bradley Roby and Kevin Byard. But to be fair, the secondary needed a bit of an overhaul regardless. They also traded Hassan Reddick. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about the additions. The Eagles made quite the splash in free agency. I'll talk about some of their bigger signings in a second, but I want to start at the linebacker position as they add Devin White on a 1-year, $7.5 million deal. They also bring in Zach Bond on, I think it was like a $3 or $4 million deal, and I think that's 1 year as well, which it's kind of interesting. Both are tweener types, so I think more so Zach Bond, bit of a tweener type guy that played edge at, I think it was Wisconsin. I don't know, that draft was so long ago, but who the Saints tried to mold into an off-ball linebacker, occasional blitzer, and it just didn't really work out or pan out in New Orleans. I'm interested to see how he will fit this defense under Vic Fangio. But they add Devin White and when it comes to Devin White, man, talent's never been an issue. It's been the play. Like, you love what he is as an athlete, the pass rush upside, but he's just so inconsistent in coverage. He's a missed tackle machine. You just want some consistency from him. So I like at least taking a shot on this type of player at linebacker, because linebacker was really bad for the Eagles last season. I talked about the secondary getting torched. Like, the linebackers were regularly just blowing coverages. And I mean, to be fair, they played a lot of man coverage last year and left their linebackers essentially out on an island to cover tight ends and running backs. And they straight up, man, they didn't have the horses to be able to do it. So it's going to be fascinating to see how these linebackers do, because they also have Nakobe Dean still there. So it's under the linebacker core. Not saying it looks like phenomenal, but you feel optimistic that one of these guys are going to step up and play well. They also brought back CJ Gardner-Johnson. Gardner-Johnson unfortunately went down early last year for the Lions. But if you remember, he was with Vic Fangio when this team went to the big game in 2022. So they're adding him to a safety room that took some hits, because you had Sidney Brown. He's going to be coming off a late season ACL injury. Kevin Byard was essentially a 1 year rental. He's gone. So like adding Gardner-Johnson, not even necessarily in the mix. You know this guy's going to start, and he played exceptionally well because, like I said, man, Fangio was a defensive consultant back in 2022 for this team, and now he is leading the charge here. They also brought in Saquon Barkley, arguably their biggest pickup. They pay him 3 years, $46.75 million, and Saquon finally gets to play, or at least run behind a hell of a good offensive line. And mind you, this offensive line lost Jason Kelce, but it's still really, really good. We'll talk about that when we get to the offensive portion of the roster. But yeah, Saquon is just a do-it-all. He's a strong, fast runner who can be a very good threat out of the backfield as a pass catcher. So, like, I like the addition. Was it expensive? Yes, but you get one of like the top 3-4 running backs in the NFL. I think if he could stay healthy, Saquon's going to probably have a big year. Their next big addition is Bryce Huff. So they wanted to add more pass rush there on the outside. Obviously, Brandon Graham, he's up there in years, but he's really a rotation guy. They have Nolan Smith. I'm kind of curious. How do they feel about Nolan Smith with the addition of Huff? They got Sweat there as well. Like, I mean, if anything, you have a very deep pass rush, or at least edge rusher rotation. And like Huff, who was really just used as a DPR, designated pass rush only, which that honestly might be his role, and which is a similar role to what Hassan Reddick did last season. So maybe they feel like they're just getting the younger version of Hassan Reddick. And I mean, Nolan Smith is a much better run defender. So maybe Nolan Smith ends up being the early down guy, and then Huff comes in on the later downs. So that would be something to look out for. But I kind of like him to the addition, man. I kind of do. Devontae Parker retired, so we're going to keep moving. Matt Hennessy comes in to be a backup here. A guy with guard and center experience, which is good. Obviously, you lose Jason Kelce, but you got the Cam Jurgens kicking into center, which is great. Everyone and their mom kind of figured he was the long-term answer there at center for Kelce when he decided to retire, but you just couldn't keep the Cam Jurgens off the field. So he ended up playing guard and played really well last year. They also added Mekhi Becton, which I think the right guard situation is going to be fascinating. Are they going to be in on the guy that they drafted, Tyler Steen? Or are they going to opt for Mekhi Becton, who's been playing guard in training camp? I'm kind of curious who starts, who will get a bulk of the snaps. Maybe we see both of them for a good part of the year. It's really kind of roll the dice, flip a coin, who you think is going to be the starter there. I've seen Steen kind of have the inside track, which, I mean, that's a guy that they drafted, but Becton has looked good in training camp, and he's a bit more veteran. So I don't know. We'll see. It's a fascinating question. Talked about Zach Bond. They also add Paris Campbell. He's going to come in and be the slot, but there's going to be some competition there in the slot. I mean, to be fair, like Dallas Goedert's a guy that kicks in the slot quite a bit from the tight end position. They drafted Johnny Wilson, who I think could be a fascinating big slot player. So like Paris Campbell will probably have a role. Question is how many snaps is he going to be on the field? How split is this going to be? But let's go ahead. Let's talk about what they did in the draft, because I loved their draft. With the Eagles' first selection, they take Quinion Mitchell, corner out of Toledo. He was my top corner in the draft. I had him as a top 10 prospect in the class. How do the Eagles keep getting value? I don't know, but it was a great pickup. Like when it comes to Fangio's defense, I know he plays a lot of quarters, but there are going to be some points where he's going to rely on one of those corners to play a good portion of the field, half of the field. So you want a guy with speed and with ball skills, and that is Quinion Mitchell. Man, this is a dude that has that big play threat. Mind you, he has a game where he had like 4 interceptions, 2 pick sixes. So he's got that big play potential. I loved the pickup there, and I was like, yes, address that secondary. They desperately need it. You need a bit of a youth movement in there, but mind you, I should probably mention this in the additions, but technically this was an addition they made last year. They have Isaiah Rodgers, who's a quality corner, who missed last season because of his suspension for gambling. Is what it is. But he's a good corner. Really, the only reason that the Colts moved on from him was because of the suspension. But he's a quality corner. You're going to have Quinion Mitchell there. And not just Mitchell, but because of the second round, they take Cooper freaking DeJean at pick 40. Exceptional value. I don't care if he's safety. I don't care if he's slot. I don't care if he's out wide. I think he could do it all. And he could probably do it all well. Right now, it sounds like Quinion Mitchell's on the inside track to be the slot corner, which I think that's fine. That's okay. If Darius Slay, his play doesn't fall off, then you don't have to move Mitchell outside right away. But you probably could, and then throw Cooper DeJean there in the slot. Or, I mean, they got Avonte Maddox still there. But Cooper DeJean was a phenomenal pick. And suddenly you feel really good about this cornerback room, this youth movement. Because, like, Cooper DeJean was, like, I think a top 5 safety for me as well. He was a top 30 prospect, and they get him at 40. This is a team that just does really good grabbing exceptional value. They just crush it in that regard. In the third round, they take Jalix Hunt, which was probably a little higher than where I had him. I think he was in that like 110 to 120 range on my big board. I can't remember, but very much a developmental prospect. Guy that has length. He's got athletic tools, but you need to polish a lot of his lot from his game. He's a guy that used to play safety, moved to the edge. So yeah, he's a developmental guy, and this feels like a high pick to take a swing on a developmental prospect, or at least to this degree, because it does feel like he is going to be a multi-year project, but kind of is what it is. They liked a guy, they went out and got him. And to be fair, like their next pick was 127, so Hunt was before that range, so maybe you don't get him with that next pick. In day 3, they begin it with Will Shipley, who's a radically different back than what they have in that backfield. He is probably another one of the top receiving options coming out of the backfield among this class. He brings return capabilities. I'd like to see that, and I say this with their 5th round pick also being Anaya Smith, someone who brings return capabilities. So I wonder if these two get involved and maybe unseat. Who's the old man they got out of Utah? I say old man. He was like 24 when he came out of the draft. I can't remember. It's like Convey. I don't know. Maybe one of these guys unseats him as the return man. Both are very good force miss tackle machines. I mean, at this point, I'm talking about both. Both are exceptionally great receiving options. Again, Smith was someone that could also profile as a running back. I mean, in the slot, he ends up moving to the slot there for A&M just because like he had quality hands, got really good speed. So, hey, after the catch threat, take advantage of it. But I like both those options, taking shots on those guys. Their other 5th round picks, they go Jeremiah Trotter Jr. So they grab, for one, now you got Jeremiah Trotter returning to Philadelphia. You get his son, but he was a good player. Like you worry a little bit in terms of the long speed, the size. Like he's a girthy player, but he's a short player, limited length. But he was constantly in the right place at the right time for Clemson. Made big plays consistently for that Clemson defense. Like he's a good player. He's a good player to have on the roster, and depending on what goes down with guys like Bond and White and can Nakobe Dean stay healthy, we might see Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Trevor Keegan, he was among a very talented Michigan offensive line that I think almost all of those parts got drafted. And he was fine. He was like, it was a solid prospect. Very solid. Very day 3 solid, but like, you're like, yeah, man, you get this guy and you feel like you got probably immediately a solid backup that maybe could develop into a starter one day. So, I mean, he comes to a place where he's got the right guy. He's going to be under Stoutland, getting developed. It's one of the best in the business. In round 6, they go with Johnny Wilson. I mentioned a little bit when we talked about him as a potential slot player. I had him a lot earlier than this, and I was probably one of the lower, I guess, draft analyst guys. I don't know, whatever the hell you want to call me. I was one of the lower people on him, but still, I had him in like the 4th round. So I still thought he should have went much higher, just in terms of speed at his size. Like, yeah, he's definitely kind of a big slot. I was like, man, just put some weight on this guy, and he can function as like a jumbo receiver, tight end 2 type for your roster. And I mean, it's not even necessarily tight end 2 type, but even you could probably even push him as a potential starter one day, because he was very good when blocking in line. That's right, Florida State asked him to do that, and he did it pretty solid. So like in the 6th round, that was a great value. Dylan McMahon, he's fine. It was an all right pickup. Kind of is what it is. He's probably a practice squad guy, a little undersized, but a very gritty, high motor center there coming out of NC State. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about the coaching staff. Before we get to the change in coordinators, because I think that's going to be the most impactful, let's quickly go over Nick Sirianni, who was hired here back in 2021. Prior to that, he was the offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts under Frank Reich. Didn't call plays. That was all Frank Reich. But even prior to that, he was a quarterback and wide receivers coach for the Chargers, and spent a little time with the Chiefs back in 2009. I think actually he was there for like 4 years. Regardless, I think Sirianni, what he does well is, I mean, some people criticize his, I mean, I guess how he goes about the game at points, because there are times where he does lean. He'll lean on the analytics. He's one of the more analytical coaches around the NFL. But like this guy knows when to jump ship. When something's not working, at least among the coaching staff, the coordinators, he's like, this has got to change. We're going to make this change. And he did during this season. Doesn't mean it necessarily worked. I mean, they went from Brian Johnson to Matt Patricia. but he is very self-aware in that regard, and that's why I can appreciate him as a head coach. Let's talk about the offense. Kellen Moore, he's coming in as the new OC. I'm actually a big Kellen Moore fan. I feel like he kind of got a raw deal of things in Los Angeles last season. Prior to that, he was the Cowboys OC and did play a little quarterback in the NFL for the Cowboys and the Lions. Kellen Moore was an Oregon Duck, or am I thinking Boise State? I can't remember now. Kellen Moore, I feel like Boise State, but I think that's wrong. Yeah, no, it is Boise State. Okay, look at that. I remember. But you're going to see a radical difference in the offense. Like last year under Johnson, it was just so cookie cutter, vanilla, just basic. There was no motion. There was no really layering of plays. They were they were among the bottom in play action. So even when the run game was doing well, they weren't really taking advantage of that. They were relying heavily on RPOs. It was kind of a collegiate offense, we're going to be honest. And on top of that, this team was terrible against pressure. They just were. When not necessarily pressure, but the blitz. When defenses brought 5 or more pass rushers, this team didn't do so hot, and it's not like we saw the Eagles offense like pick up on that and be like, okay, you know what? Let's keep the running back or the tight end here to do a little pass protection. They were like, nope, Jalen, figure it out, bruh. Good luck. This is on you. And it's like, okay. Like I feel really bad that like Jalen Hurts, he gets some hate. He gets some hate out there. I think more of it might be tush push related. But a lot of this offense was on his shoulders. And it really shouldn't be that way. I think Kellen Moore is going to complement him well because you're going to see a lot more play action. You're going to see a lot more motion, a lot just being able to layer plays more effectively, more efficiently. You're also going to see a variety when it comes to the run scheme. Like another thing about this offense last year, I think they were like 3rd in the league in snaps from shotgun. And when it comes to the run game, there's only so much you can do in shotgun, right? You're not going to exactly run outside zone in shotgun, right? So I think we're going to see some more snaps under center, and we're going to see some variance in the run game, because I think that's what Kellen Moore did really well, at least with Dallas. I know last year was kind of a crapshoot, but with Dallas, he did a good job of just doing a lot, keeping the defense guessing, but making looks look similar when you are like, whether it's coming out in a certain personnel or running certain concepts and whatnot. He makes it look similar so he can layer different plays on top of that. So I think Kellen Moore's good, man. I think it's good. We'll see how he does. Doesn't necessarily mean the run offense has been always successful under Kellen Moore, but it's been pretty solid. I think a C+ grade. It's kind of a low grade, man. I gotta go back in and reevaluate how I do these grades and tiers. Hey, it's the first year doing them, all right? It's the first year doing them. Vic Fangio, y'all Eagles fans, you should be very familiar with him. He was a consultant here back in 2022. He's one of the more seasoned coaches around the league. He's been around for a while. He was a former Dolphin, formerly the Dolphins DC, and that defense was hella good last year. He may be bend don't break, but when he's got talent, when he's got guys, watch out. Especially like a Jalen Ramsey. Last season, someone was like, someone who he could move around and kind of rely to shut down a section of the field. Very important. I assume they're kind of hoping Quinion Mitchell could maybe become that. But prior to his stay in both Miami and Philly, he was the head coach for the Denver Broncos. He was also a DC for the Niners and the Bears. Like I said, this guy's been around for a while. You tend to see multiple fronts, but typically it's a 3-4 usually, but sometimes he gets creative. They bring in, we'll talk about this a little bit later when we get to the coaching staff, but they bring in Clint Hurt from Seattle, former Seattle defensive coordinator, where he kind of led the charge there of turning the Seattle Seahawks defense from a 4-3 into a 3-4. So largely we're going to probably see a 3-4 defense here for the Eagles, which, I mean, that's what it was for the Dolphins anyway, so kind of is what it is. You're going to see too high. You're going to see a lot of quarters. That's just kind of what he does there. Quarters match. Many different variations on corners. So quarters. So that's what he brings to the table. He might not necessarily blitz a ton. He likes to rely on that his defensive line can bring in pressure, but he is willing to simulate pressure, whether that's maybe dropping an edge back into coverage, which is, I mean, that's cool when you got guys like Zach Bond. Even Nolan Smith can do that. Technically, like maybe Devin White, play him out on the edge. You have guys that can do that and then bring in blitzers, whether it's from the linebacker position, whether it's Devin White, Zach Bond, or even elsewhere. Even maybe it's a safety like a CJ Gardner-Johnson. Like, he just does a really good job at that. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about the rest of this coaching staff. We're going to scroll down as you have Jamal Singleton. He's the running backs and assistant head coach here. They got two assistant head coaches, as you also got Kevin Patullo, who's hella good, man, and someone who I'm kind of curious if he ends up going elsewhere somewhere in the future, because I think he's overdue for a coordinator position, but kind of is what it is. You typically slap that assistant head coach title or associate head coach title on guys that you want to keep. They also got, I mentioned the big hurt. Well, I guess the little hurt. He ain't really Frank Thomas, but you got Clint Hurt here, who did a really good job with Seattle, at least in terms of the developing the pass rush, developing the defensive line, and kind of was a big reason for Boye Mafe's breakout season last year. So he's going to come here. He's going to be a senior defensive assistant, but he's also going to be the defensive line coach, and I think that's going to be very, very huge. Jeff Stoutland, he is probably one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Like, no one quite develops offensive linemen like Stoutland. Like, you got Callahan, Brian Callahan. Is it Brian Callahan, or I'm thinking Bryce Callahan? Which one's the dad? Which one's the son? Brian Callahan. No. I'm looking for your daddy. I'm looking for your daddy. Bill. It's Bill. It's Bill Callahan. Golly, dude. Stinking B-letter names. But Bill Callahan, he's known for having a real good eye for offensive line talent, while Jeff Stoutland's kind of known as the developer of offensive line talent. So, like, those are probably your two, like, best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Let's see what else we got going on here. As Doug Nussmeier is the quarterback's coach. This is going to be his first year as the QB's coach for the Eagles. If Nussmeier looks familiar, it's because his son's currently the starting quarterback for the LSU Tigers, and Garrett Nussmeier. Very curious to see how he does this season. Jeremiah Washburn, he's gonna kind of takes over. Him and Clint Hurt kind of take over the defensive line, or even front seven-ish roles, as Washburn's going to be dealing with everything kind of like pass rusher related. It's just kind of a different title here. Defensive end, outside linebackers coach. It's basically pass rush specialist. That's what it is. Let's see. We got Ronell Williams, which Ronell Williams is actually having a change in title here. He was the Nichols coach last year for the Eagles, and now he's the assistant linebackers coach and defensive quality control coach. So that's important to know. And of course, you got the GOAT, you got the legend, you got Big Dom here. He has now a bunch of new titles to his name, as most notably, you recognize him for Dre Greenlaw taking a swing on him, and then both of them getting ejected, and then Big Dom gets this big standing ovation. Apparently, he was a big reason for Darius Slay returning to the Eagles last season. Like, Darius Slay apparently was a Raven until he got the call for Big Dom. I don't know how that happens. I don't know. Big Dom's kind of this, I don't know, maybe he kind of at this point feels like the spirit animal of the Philadelphia Eagles. He's kind of the GOAT in that regard. I wasn't about ready. I got like a spreadsheet where I just have everything Eagles, and I wasn't about ready to write down all them titles. I just put GOAT next to Dom. But let's go ahead. Let's get to the offense. So I said earlier in the video when I was talking about the efficiency of the offense that yes, a lot of their miscues were self-induced. The play calling was very blah last season, and just in general the scheme. But the talent is there. The talent kind of carried this squad, as you can tell from all these freaking A grades I have around the whole team. Like, Jalen Hurts has become a very good quarterback, and I will stand by that. This team asked too much, basically told him to go out there and do it by himself. That's essentially what was happening. Like, they were hanging everything on the arm of Jalen Hurts rather than, well, having any form of a scheme or a plan. Like, it literally felt like just pickup football. That's what I'm saying. Like a pickup game of football. Basically, hey, you're our quarterback. We're just going to go out there and run some routes. We ain't got to worry about protection. We're not going to disguise things. Screw our play action. Yeah, screw all that stuff. Motion, blah. They were among the, last in the league, I think. Last or maybe second to last in the league when it came to motion. So, the offense was static, unimaginative, and bland. So they put a lot on Hurts, and I think he did well with what he was given. I know people are going to look at the 15 interceptions, and I had to say this in my Texans video. I don't understand why, I get why people quote interceptions, but I don't think the interception number, it's not a good determinator. It's not a good way to make a decision on if a quarterback is turnover prone, puts the ball in harm's way. It's not. I think it's more indicative to look at their turnover worthy plays. I'm not saying interception is a meaningless stat, because it's not, but you got to understand, not every interception is on the quarterback. That's why you look at the turnover worthy play rate, which if you were to see that, oh, it was 15. That's relatively fine. That's solid. That's a solid number for an NFL quarterback. It just so happens that, a lot of his turnover-worthy throws became interceptions. When it came to the big-time throws, 28. That's a hell of a good number. Jalen Hurts, he can make the big-time throws. He could also pick up some meaningful yards on the ground, not just the tush-push yards. Before I get to the backfield, I kind of want to jump to the offensive line. I'm rolling with the veteran here in Mekhi Becton at right guard. It'll probably, there's a good chance it could be Steen. For me, it was kind of a toss-up between the two. I've heard a lot of good things in training camp about Mekhi Becton and his move to guard. That Stoutland has just really, really liked what he's done there. So I'm kind of leaning on that. Again, it's training camp, it's preseason. Take everything with a grain of salt. But like, not hearing really any negative when it came to Becton, I thought was pretty huge. So I'm going to lean with him, but honestly, it's a toss-up between him and Steen. Regardless, that's kind of the big question mark on the offensive line. Because the rest of the positions, well, these guys are really, really good. We could start with Jordan Mailata, one of the best tackles in the NFL. Dude's hella good. We could talk about Lane Johnson. Fun fact, Lane Johnson's still doing it, and doing it well. He only missed 1 game last season. So that's great because like kind of the thing with Lane Johnson, it's like, oh golly, he's gonna miss a couple of games just because he's up there in years and ready to retire. But I played almost every game last year. And I mean, to be fair, like he really hasn't been injury prone the last 3 years. He just hasn't. He's played a good healthy amount of the snaps. So, and not even like he's not even injury prone. He had like what? Maybe a 2-year span where he was banged up. Like in recent history, but regardless, Lane Johnson, he's still a hella good. One of the best tackle duos in the NFL. You got Landon Dickerson, who if this guy is, if he's like the 3rd best offensive lineman on your line, you're in really good shape. And then you got like Cam Jurgens now moving to center, man. This is what they brought him in to do. I'm a big fan of the Cam Jurgens. Thought he looked very, very solid at right guard last season, and I think he's going to look better at center. Like I said, man, the real big question. And I mean, this is going to be fun because I think this is an offensive line with a lot of flexibility. Guys that can certainly move, but they also bring a certain level of power to them. So they can play, I think, a variety of different like run blocking schemes and whatnot. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm excited about that for Jalen Hurts too, man. That you're actually going to put him in promising situations. Like he legit deserves that. But let's talk about Saquon. Saquon's finally gonna be running behind a really good offensive line. Thank freaking goodness. Like Saquon's again one like a top 4, top 5 back in the NFL. And I mean we could take a look at how much of an improvement or an upgrade is he over like a DeAndre Swift who we had last year. So let's go ahead. Let's just crunch the numbers and keep in mind we're doing this with Saquon running behind a very bad offensive line for the New York Giants. So you had 43 forced missed tackles last year for Swift. He did that on 229 carries during the regular season. So we're going to get a similar carry total. You have 247. So about 16 carries more, only 31 forced missed tackles. Yeah, and that's Saquon. It's like, oh, that number's down. It's like, yeah. But I mean, this guy's getting hit at the line of scrimmage. There's only so much you can do. But despite that, yards after contact, Saquon, he's better by like 0.5. And that may not sound big, but that's a pretty big number. So I feel like he's going to eat, and he's going to eat well. On top of that, Saquon brings what he can do in the passing game. He had 280 receiving yards last year. And keep in mind, man, like this is a team that went through Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, Tommy DeVito. Like there was a revolving door there at quarterback. So like, yeah, I don't think I need to talk you much into Saquon being a big upgrade. So let's just move to the wide receivers. One of the best wide receiver tandems in the NFL in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, I know fantasy heads are going to be like, man, Devontae Smith was all right last year, but nothing special. I mean, he had over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. Like A.J. Brown, he may have had more yards, like by 400, but like Smith was hella good. hella good last year. And it just kind of gets lost in translation there. I feel like Jalen Waddle's kind of in the same boat, being next to Tyreek. It's like, no, these guys are really good. They truly are. But yeah, again, just a phenomenal duo there. Very reliable as well. I mean, these are guys that just catch everything that comes their way. AJ Brown, 3.6 drop rate. That's amazing. You got Devontae Smith, 5.8. Also, Dallas Goedert, one of the I would argue he's like a top 7 tight end in the NFL. He missed a few games last season. Was it a hamstring issue? Let me see. He missed time because of a forearm. That's like the hamstring of the arm. Not at all. But forearm injury, but hella good. So you got 3 very good pass catching options there. You also now add Saquon to the mix there. And I think slot's going to be a revolving door, whether it's Paris Campbell, Johnny Wilson, Dallas Goedert. Maybe you get real crazy. You get a little Saquon Barkley there. I don't know. Maybe you get real fun and put like Will Shipley, Anaya Smith. Like there's possibilities. Not to say like they're like, and it's not like they're like the most proven possibilities in the world, but like there's a chance to be fun here. There's a chance to be fun. But let's take a gander at the depth on this roster. As let's start with the receiver. Britton Cove. I can't get it. I don't know. I think he might be on the outside looking in. That I think Anaya Smith maybe potentially takes that spot, or even like Johnny Wilson being a big slot. I think is a very intriguing option. But they got size, they got speed. In terms of the depth on this core, like John Ross, speed, love it. Anaya Smith, speed. Some of the other guys here, Joseph Nagata, he's more of a possession type of receiver. Should have been a better 50-50 guy in college. Just didn't work out that way. He's just a practice squad body, maybe. Jacob Harris. Oh, Jacob Harris. Where'd you come from? Central Florida. Oh, was this the guy that was kind of a freak coming out? That tested out like just stupid well? Maybe not. Again, not going to talk out of ignorance if I'm not familiar with the player. So I'm not going to talk much here about Griffin, Herbert, or Austin Watkins. They're probably just camp bodies. But I'm going to be fascinated because I think they might have some guys that could potentially take up the return snaps from Cove, because I don't think he doesn't really offer anything offensively for this squad. So I think it'd be all right to probably move on and shoot for the moon with like Will Shipley or Anaya Smith as your return men. When it comes to the backfield, this team loves Kenneth Gainwell, and I think that's fine. He's a solid back, but this is going to be very much the Saquon Barkley show. I think he's going to be a bit of the bell cow here. But, I mean, Gainwell is someone they trust. He was relatively solid last year. You do want the fumbles kind of to work themselves out. I mean, being a smaller back, though, doesn't surprise me that he had a bit of a fumbling problem last season, coming in at 5'9", 200 pounds, so not like terribly small, but still. But they like him here. He's going to be entering his potentially last season of his contract, I should say. Will Shipley, I talked about when I talked about the draft picks. Big fan of his. Tyron Davis Price is more of a bruiser, and that's kind of, if they keep a fourth back, that's going to be the type of back that they pick, the bruiser type, because Kendall Milton is a bit of that, coming out of Georgia, a bit of a bruiser. Lou Nichols, coming out of Central Michigan a few years ago. I think it was Central Michigan. CMU, I'm pretty sure. But he's a bit of a bruiser. Guys with size. It's kind of a toss-up. I kind of like Milton a little bit better. And, I mean, he played at Georgia. And the Eagles probably should love him because of that. But regardless, this is Saquon's show. Tight ends, Grant Calcaterra, dude. The dude that had a very interesting college career because of there were injury red flags. I think it was concussions with him, but it's nice to see him getting like a healthy role in this offense. Now, I mean, I know you're gonna like look and be like, okay, the dude had like all of 4 receptions last year, but he's stepping up into a bigger role here. And I don't exactly think guys like Albert O or CJ Uzama are there for any other reason than depth. I truly and honestly believe that. I think this team has been developing Calcaterra, and they're ready for him to step up as kind of the tight end 2 here. But not to say that they actually went to like 2 tight end options a ton last year, because remember, the offense was boring as hell. Schematically, the offense was boring as hell. As Marnie Rogers is someone with some high receiving potential, but he's an undersized tight end, probably just a camp body here. EJ Jenkins can tell you much about, or Kevin Bullish. Offensive line depth, yes, it's deep. I've been like the biggest Fred Johnson like truther. I think he's a solid backup. I really do. I think he's pretty darn good, that he's a guy that could step in a game or two and you feel okay about. I really liked him with the Bengals. Of course, on the other side, you got Darian Kennard. Rather not see him out there just yet. Guy you probably need to continue to develop, and I mean, you're gonna go with the guy with more in-game experience, and that's Fred Johnson. Anim Dankwa out of Howard, this gargantuan human being, just huge as hell, but very unpolished. He's probably going to be on the practice squad, and Southland's going to get an opportunity to develop him. I actually liked Gottlieb Ayidze out of Maryland. I thought he was someone that you could probably develop, whether it's at guard or at tackle. So I think he's definitely on the practice squad. So those are guys maybe to keep an eye out for, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line. On the interior, potentially you're going to have Steen or Becton as a backup, and you're probably feeling relatively solid that one of those guys are going to play relatively solid as the starter. Matt Hennessy is a solid backup, as Trevor Keegan is. I don't think the ceiling's great for Keegan. I think it's fine. But in terms of ceiling, we're probably talking about maybe like a mid-level starter, potentially. But I think at the very least, he's going to be a high-end backup in the NFL. Max Sharpton, it hasn't worked in the NFL. I don't see him making the squad. Nick Gates, injuries have kind of been a thing for him over his career, but it's nice to see him at least in here in camp. I think we got to at least talk about the backup quarterback position a little bit. As my boy Tanner McKee currently leading the race, and honestly, he's looked all right, man. He's looked all right in preseason. He had the fumble, but outside of that, man, I think he's been relatively solid. Let's see how Kenny Pickett. I haven't seen Kenny Pickett. I don't remember watching Kenny Pickett in preseason. Oh, Pickett's been all right. Okay, it's a tight race. Regardless, you probably feel really good about your emergency quarterback then, right? Whether that's Tanner McKee or Pickett. Doesn't mean you feel great about your backup, that it's one of those guys. Who Pickett, he's got the more NFL experience. To be fair, McKee was just drafted in 2023. Hasn't really seen any game experience, like regular season experience, I should say. So, like, you probably lean on Kenny Pickett just because he has that as the backup, with McKee being the emergency quarterback. But you don't feel great about your backup situation. You just don't. Will Grier, it's cool to see him here. I liked him coming out of West Virginia at a point in time, but that is now gone. But yeah, the offense is going to be hella good, and I feel really good about it under Kellen Moore. I think we're going to see a return to prominence for this offense. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about the defense. So I don't expect the defense to be as bad as it was last year. And there's still some parts that kind of need to fall in place for the defense. But you definitely feel a bit way more encouraged than you did last season. As again, Desai, man, I don't know what he was doing by like when you got guys like old heads like James Bradbury and Darius Slay, and you're like, you know what, we're gonna run a lot of like man coverage, and we're just gonna play like single high, and this is coming right off of the defense being super good in 2022 by playing quarters, by playing a lot of zone. I was just flabbergasted by that last season, and it was, and I get it, man. This defense was hurt at times last year, like the secondary certainly was. If you want to go through the injuries, yeah, like against Sidney Brown, he goes down with the ACL. You had Blankenship, I think, missed a game because of the rib and the concussion. James Bradbury had a concussion. Isaiah Rodgers was suspended. We'll talk about him in a second. But also, like, you had a pectoral injury from Maddox. Slay had a knee injury. Like, these guys were banged up, man, in the secondary. They were, but that's not fake. Like, well, if they were healthy, they would be much better. No, they weren't. Even when healthy, they weren't that good. James Bradbury probably had one of the worst seasons of his career, allowed 6 tutties. Reed Blankenship, man, I thought he was certainly developing well, and I mean, the guy's a playmaker, but he blew a few coverages last year, having to play that stupid, basically, like middle deep. I mean, you are the one in cover one, and yeah, he ended up allowing 6 tutties from that position. I mentioned the linebackers. They didn't do a great job. Nicholas Morrow allowed 4 tutties. So yeah, it was a rough go at it for this squad through the air, and I do expect it to be much better. Just like if even if we weren't talking about the additions and just from Fangio returning, I thought this team was going to be much better, but they made some solid additions. We should probably start with the secondary. And let's talk about Isaiah Rodgers. Didn't play last season because of the suspension. He's back, but it's not like he's an old head. He's 26 years old. He's 6 years old. And fun fact, he played really well for Indianapolis in 2022 and 2021. Played hella good. Ended up, especially 2022, where he had only teams weren't even targeting him. Allowed only 125 yards, and I believe that wasn't Matt Eberflus, Gus Bradley, right? I think that was under Gus Bradley's defense. Golly, it's been so long, I can't even remember. But like, I truthfully expect Rodgers to do really, really well defensively for this squad, and then you get CJ Gardner-Johnson reunited with Vic, and I think it's gonna be beautiful. Like, let's go look at that majestic 2022 season, as here we are, as he ended up having only 1 interception. Oh, my bad. I was looking at the wrong. I was looking at last year. But he had 6 interceptions in 2022. Holy moly, dude. This guy was everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. He ended up having over 60 tackles. And the guy's a hard hitter when coming downhill. So like, I really like that. I really like CJ and Vic coming back, reunited here a year later. Darius Slay. How was last year for Darius Slay? Well, not nearly as bad as it was for James Bradbury. I mean, so bad that Bradbury's working out at safety now. But he had 7 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, allowed 2 tutties. Did allow quite a bit of yards. 63.2% isn't terrible for a corner, but you kind of want them to be under that 60 number. Like corners that are really good, typically that number is in the 50s, or if they're elite, potentially lower in terms of completion rate, completion percentage. And I still think Slay's got, he's still got some more in him before you could say he's washed. I know he's 33, but I think he's got at least a season in him before you're like, okay, if you want to continue your career, you probably should maybe try to move you to safety. It's kind of how corners stick in the league for a long time. Like Kareem Jackson did the same thing. He was like, can't hang at corner anymore, so let's make this move to safety. And then apparently you become a headhunter. Who would have thought, right? Quinyon Mitchell has been working out in the nickel. Vontae Maddox says it's been going really well, that he's kind of taken Mitchell under his wing and started mentoring him for that. Matter of fact, they're listing Maddox at safety as well. So this is very fascinating. But I like Mitchell a ton. And you know what? If Vic uses Quinyon Mitchell, and this is just guesswork on my part, okay? This is just guesswork. This could be, this is just me talking at this point. But let's take a look at Jalen Ramsey's usage last season. Because Ramsey was someone that McFangio was like, you're going to do everything for me. And, oh, wow, man. Not going to lie. I expected it to be a little bit more diverse. But I do suppose in those variations of quarters, like quarter, half, Ramsey was consistently the half. So I feel like that's fair. I feel like that's essentially what Mitchell's responsibility is gonna be, like, moving forward. I honestly would. I would just have Mitchell play on the outside. That's just me. Again, the season's not here. Preseason training camps where they get to try things. So maybe that ends up being the case. I don't know. We'll see. Regardless, I'm feeling better about the cornerback room. We'll talk a little bit. Actually, let's just go ahead and talk about the depth there at corner. As they got Cooper DeJean listed as the backup there in the nickel. He's honestly, you could work him at safety, work him outside, and probably feel okay. At corner, you got Eli Ricks, you got Keely Ringo. Those are two guys that honestly played relatively solid last season when they came in. More so Keely Ringo. So you got to imagine Ringo's probably the next guy in if injuries happen at corner. As last season, he ended up playing almost 200 snaps. Had an interception, had a pass breakup, a lot of completion rate of 55.6%. Those are solid numbers. So you're feeling good about the depth there. Eli Ricks, they're still developing. Should have been drafted, though. That always blows my mind. Ended up going as a UDFA. Josh Jobe is here. Could be on the outside looking in. Sean Stevens, I liked. He had an impressive pro day performance at a Ferris State. I get it. He's a little undersized, but the dude can move. And he had a lot, and I mean a lot of ball skills there at Ferris State. You also got guys like Pari Nickerson. He's special teams at best. Zach McPherson, at this point, it's like, it didn't work out. Kind of is what it is. We're going to move on. You go to safety. You got Avonte Maddox. You got James Bradbury here as your backup safeties, which, I mean, Sidney Brown probably starts the year on IR, whether that's 4 weeks or 8 weeks. He's coming off the ACL injury. Caden Stearns, man, I remember I did my Broncos deep dive, and earlier he was still a part of the team there, and I was like, man, I feel like I don't know why he's still on this roster. He just went on the field, man. The results are just so you can't predict them. Great athlete, doesn't necessarily know what he's doing there at safety all the time. Probably ends up being cut. That's what I think. Andre Sam was an older safety prospect out of LSU, I believe. I know he was at McKinnis State, something like that. Great story. If you have a chance to go look at his background, guy that's gone through personal tragedy, probably ends up being on the practice squad. Pretty solid athlete. Tristan McCullen, couldn't tell you much about him, but if I had to say who sticks to the roster, I think Sydney starts on the IR. So we could just toss him right now. I think you keep Ringo, you keep Ricks. You got Bradbury and Maddox as backups. Yeah, it's probably going to be these 5. Joe probably ends up on the practice squad. Stevens, I hope, ends up on the practice squad. Same with Sam. I don't think Stearns makes the team. McPherson honestly could end up not making the team either, and that would make sense to me. So there are some predictions right there for you. I guess we go to linebacker. I got Zach Bond and White. I don't really know how this is going to work out with Nakobe Dean. I just didn't know if I could trust Nakobe Dean to stay healthy, which is a real shame because when he's been on the field, at least last year, he was relatively good last year, especially against the run. Unfortunately, only played 182 snaps through 5 games. For him, it was the a foot injury that kept him out last year, so that really sucked. So I don't know if I could trust Dean, but trust him health wise. I definitely think he's probably the best run defender on the team. He's more put together than guys like Zach Bond and Devin White, guys who have been in the league for a little bit. I think he's more put together, more disciplined, willing to play his assignment. He's not as much of a tweener as these guys are. So it'll be fascinating to see the usage, not even a word, usage when it comes to this defense. Let's talk about, I guess, the depth. You got Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I talked about him a little bit. There's some limitations there, but he's also a good player that also brings some good pass rush and upside. Oren Burks played some good football for the, I believe it was the Niners last year. Was it last year or the year before? Here, let's take a quick gander. Let's take a quick look. Oren Burks. It was for the Niners. So yeah, like he didn't play a ton of snaps for the last couple of years. He played really good in that Niner defense. He really did. Hell yeah, man. Honestly, that's good. That's really good depth there. Ben Van Sumeren was just kind of this pro day ridiculousness out of Michigan State. I don't think he's really anything more than that. Is this my boy Brandon Smith from Penn State? It is. Dang it, dude. You love the athletic upside, but a guy that played overhang safety at Penn State, moved to a more traditional linebacker role in his final year at Penn State, and you were like, oh gosh, this guy has a lot to work on, and that's kind of been the case in the NFL, unfortunately. Let's talk about the pass rush, man. Let's do it. And you know what? I might as well do it from this screen. So I think you got Josh Sweat. He's going to be your 3-down player. And then it's going to be Nolan Smith on early downs and then Bryce Huff on maybe later downs. Again, this is just me kind of guessing. There's going to be a good healthy rotation just because you're so deep on the defensive line. Like you still, like Brandon Graham's still going to see quite a bit on the field. They've had Terrion Jackson for a minute. How many snaps did he have last year? Not that many. I don't see it. I don't see it. Yeah, didn't play at all. Was he hurt? I don't know. I don't see anything, but he's probably a long shot because I mean, you already got 4 good edge players there. Hunt, he's a developmental prospect, but you can't throw him on the practice squad, so he's making the team. So Jackson's probably Jackson and Johnson, both guys that they got in late day 3, taking a swing on a couple of edge rushers, and hasn't really worked out. I mean, Johnson only had 30 snaps last year, so they're probably practice squad bodies, or maybe you just let them loose. Speaking of which, Terrell Lewis, kind of a probably really just a camp body at this juncture in his career. You got Julian Akawara, very experienced pass rusher, but I mean, you're just so deep at pass rusher. It's just an outside. It's just too much of an outside shot on making the squad. I mean, we moved to the defensive line, and like when you go look at my starters listed, dude, like I got, of course, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter there on the interior, but I mean, didn't even list like Milton Williams, who, if you didn't know, was a hella good last year for the Eagles. Last season, Milton Williams played just a smidge under 500 snaps. 22 pressures, did have a sack, was very solid as a run defender, so he's going to be in the mix there. I'm a big fan of Marlon Tuipulotu, but let's be honest, he's depth at this juncture. Thomas Booker gives this team a potential pass rusher if they hold on to him. Because again, I mean, Thomas Booker and Gabe Hall are very similar. We're very similar prospects coming out of their respective draft classes. Hall's probably a practice squad body. Twitched up, good explosive first step, but kind of a one-trick pony in that regard as a pass rusher. Solid enough run defender. You could probably say similar things about Thomas Booker. PJ Mustafer's more of just this space-eating 0-1 tech player. I mean, what are you up to nowadays? Marlon Tuipulotu, he's at 307, so he's not exactly going to be playing a lot of A-gap for you. So Mustafer maybe has an outside shot of making this squad just because of the role he brings to the table. I liked Moro Ojamo coming out of Texas back in 2023. I don't think he played a good deal. Yeah, he only had 68 snaps. But again, I mean, you kind of get lost in the shuffle with how good this defensive line is. I mean, you look at Jalen Carter last year. The dude started out the year really hot, did cool down the stretch, but still on 562 snaps, he had 49 pressures, 7 sacks. Jordan Davis being that space-eating run defender, which I think he does a good job at, and he's a guy that's athletically gifted enough to chase you to the sideline. But he had 18 pressures, 4 sacks. Talked about Milton Williams having the 22-1. So it's like they got guys on the interior. This is a very good defensive line. I expect this defense, at least I expect the defensive line to perform much better. I expect the pass rush to reemerge. Again, the pass rush kind of during that skid where they went like 1-5, kind of disappeared. The run defense will be better because that's Vic Fangio's game. I say will be better. They're not gonna let I don't think they're gonna let a lot of big runs happen, but you could probably see 4 or 5 yard gains on the ground regularly. Because I mean, Vic Fangio's kind of bend don't break. But last year, that actually ended up being a really good run defense for the Dolphins. But then again, maybe you can make a good case that the linebacker core was a bit better there in Miami. I would say it still is. Coverage, man. There's still question marks at coverage. Isaiah Rodgers coming back after a year off. Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, they're rookie corners. Darius Slayton, he's up there in years, so it's like it's fair to be like, okay. Coverage wise, even Reed Blankenship, he was kind of a blown coverage guy, like made a lot of plays, but he played with that high risk, high reward. But he won't nearly be put in compromising positions like he was last year under Sean Desai. So like he's going to be in a better position to make those plays this year with a little less in terms of responsibility on the back end, at least area that he's going to have to cover. So like I like this defense being much better, but without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get to how I project this team doing in 2024. Last season, the Eagles had the 11th easiest schedule, and that ended up turning into 11 wins. They went 11-6. And quite frankly, you look at that and you're like, this team should have been so much better. It's kind of wild to look at an 11-win team and be like, no, they should have been a lot better. There was a lot wrong there. And quite frankly, they probably should have won like 13, at the very least 13 games last season, but they ended up being a really bad team down the stretch, going 1-5 in their final 6 games. And that energy carried on into the playoffs. Granted, they had some injuries happening as well, but let's be real, even when the team was healthy, the play calling was bad on both sides. It just was. But this year, I have them having an even easier schedule. I got them with the 8th easiest schedule in the NFL. That's my projection. So as always, let's go ahead. Let's project the ceiling of this team. And then I'll tell you what my actual prediction is for them. They'll open the year apparently in Brazil. Got that wrong in my Packers deep dive. Thought it was a home game for Philly. Sorry. Don't keep big track on the international games as much as I apparently should. Apparently the Packers have a big following in Brazil. Maybe it's, I don't know, they have similar colors in green and gold or green and yellow. Regardless, we are projecting the ceiling of the Eagles, and I'm going to go with the Eagles winning this game. I got them beating, let's say, the Falcons. I think they're better than a team like the Saints. And oh no, you get a rematch in Tampa Bay. Golly, what a nightmare. That's so wild because they played twice in Tampa Bay last season, and they're now they got to play in Tampa again 3 times in 2 years. That's wild. That's wild. And maybe they do again in the playoffs. Who knows? It could be crazy, but having to play in Tampa 3 different times is kind of a nutty thing. I think I'm going to lean with actually Tampa Bay here because let's be honest, every year good teams drop games that they shouldn't, and maybe this is one of those games. They'll be coming out of their bye. They get a home game. I know it's against a very good defense in Cleveland, but that's very winnable. The Giants always end up being a thorn some way, somehow in the Eagles' side, so I'm going to give the Giants the home win here, but I'm going to have them end up splitting that. Bengals in Cincinnati. Could be a winnable game, but that's kind of a tough game. So I'm going to go ahead and be like, you know what? Let's give the Bengals the home win there, especially if they stay healthy. Then again, the run defense, it looks really bad for the Bengals. It was bad last year and it hasn't looked that good in preseason. And I know it's preseason, but it becomes a bit more alarming when it was something they struggled with last year and you're still seeing it. So actually, I'm going to go with the Eagles here. I'm going to give them a win over the Jags. I'm going to have them split with the Cowboys because that's just what they do. And potentially split with the Commanders. Because you're facing, that's kind of the wild thing. You have to face the Commanders late season. So Jaden Daniels with all of probably at this point 9 to 10 games under his belt. He's probably going to be playing better football. And you could probably say the same about the defense there. So I think I'm going to have them split the NFC. No, this is the ceiling. We're projecting the ceiling. Okay, I'm going to give them 2 wins over the Commanders, which to be fair, I know both games were tight last year. But the Eagles ended up winning. I think this Rams game could prove to be difficult. But I think they probably win one of these away games, whether it's against the Ravens or the Rams, so I'm going to go ahead and give them a win there. Panthers, Steelers, those are wins. Kenny Pickett revenge game from the bench, baby. I did say I was going to give them win over the Commanders, give them the sweep. And they close out the year with 3 consecutive division games. 2 of them are going to be at home. So that puts their ceiling at 13. And to be fair, in the NFL, it's tough to win more than 13. It's just the fact of the matter. And when it comes to my projection for the squad, I'm not far off. I got them at 12-5. I got them improving by 1 game. They got an easier schedule this season. I know it was easy last year. So, I mean, how much easier can it really be? What's the difference between the 11th ranked schedule and the 8th easiest schedule, you know? So, I'm not going to really take that into account. But, I mean, I think coordinator is going to make a world of difference. That should at least turn into 1 extra win with how bad the coordinators were last year for the Eagles. So, I think 12-5 is a good shout out for the Eagles. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. How do you think the Eagles are going to fare in 2024? Are you excited about the additions of Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio? If you want to check out more of my deep dives, maybe on some of your NFC East rivals like the Cowboys, you can check out that video down here. Or you can check out some of my summer scouting for the 2025 NFL draft class. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.